Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, please hit that sub button and join the family. We're so close to 30,000 subs, and you can make that possible. Smash that like button if you enjoyed today's stories.
It started out like the kind of evening where you think, yeah, this might actually turn into something. I met Adnan at a community film night at this little arts center downtown. He was volunteering, handing out popcorn in these paper bags that barely held anything. He had this kind of dry humor and was weird in a charming way. You know the type. Talked too much about obscure jazz albums, but somehow pulled it off. We ended up talking after the event about the worst movies we'd ever read, and he invited me to dinner at his place the next weekend. At first I hesitated. I'm not usually the type to go to someone's apartment that soon, but he made it sound really laid back, just a simple meal and some records. Said he was gonna cook me a dish that's been passed down in his family for generations. You're gonna remember this for the rest of your life, he said. I didn't realize how true that would turn out to be. His place was in this old duplex right behind a laundromat. You know, the kind that smells like soap and hot air even from across the street. Inside it was honestly kind of cool. A bunch of secondhand furniture, crates of vinyl stacked high like they were walls, and a tiny kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1992. When I walked in, the food already smelled kind of strong, but I figured maybe it was just a super spiced dish or something fermented. He had this little candle burning on the table and actual tablecloth, which was definitely a pillowcase, but I appreciated the effort. He poured me a glass of some homemade ginger soda he claimed he'd been brewing all week, which tasted like carbonated vinegar and regret. But I smiled and sipped it anyway, trying to be open. Then he brought out the meal. It looked like some kind of stew, brownish red, a little shiny on top, with chunks of meat and rice on the side. I'm not gonna lie, it didn't look great, but he was watching me real intense, like he couldn't wait for me to try it. So I took a bite. The first thing I noticed was the texture. The meat was weird. Kind of stringy, but also mushy in parts. The flavor was overpowering, like someone dropped a whole jar of cumin into it and said, "That'll do." Still, I kept chewing and forced a smile. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "So, what do you think of the meat?" I swallowed barely and told him it was interesting. That's when he got this big grin on his face and said, "Glad you like it. I got it from the dumpster behind Pete's grocery this morning. Still smelled fine." I thought he was joking. I laughed, but he didn't. He just stared at me like he was waiting for applause or something. I asked him what he meant, and he told me straight up that he dumpster dives for ingredients with soul. His words, not mine. Said he only does it for meat because that's the real test. He thinks society wastes too much food and people are too sensitive about dates printed on packaging. I legit sat there halfway through a spoonful, just frozen. I couldn't even fake eat after that. My stomach was already starting to twist, and not in a romantic way. He kept eating though, like nothing was wrong, even got up and offered to pack me leftovers. I tried to politely pass, saying I was full, but he didn't stop. Said it was important to him that I understood the philosophy. He even opened his fridge to show me all the other stuff he'd collected that week. I kid you not, he had a plastic drawer filled with raw chicken in a Ziploc bag that looked like it had been through 5 summers, and a block of cheese that was literally growing something blue and fuzzy. At that point, I made up some excuse about needing to wake up early and started gathering my stuff. He looked kind of disappointed but walked me to the door and told me he'd love to cook for me again. Said next time he was thinking of trying a seafood dish he saw behind a sushi place. I barely made it to my car before gagging into a napkin. When I got home, I spent half the night Googling symptoms of food poisoning just in case. I didn't get sick, thankfully, but I couldn't eat meat for a solid 2 weeks after that without picturing that stew and wondering how long it had been sitting out before he scooped it up. The wildest part. He texted me the next day saying he had a great time and thought I handled the test well. Said he was impressed I didn't run away the moment he mentioned the dumpster. I didn't even know what to say to that. I just left it on read. I told a friend about it later and she didn't believe me until I showed her a photo of the stew I sneakily took under the table. She gagged. She also told me she'd once matched with him on a dating app, but never met up because he asked her in his first message if she was open to alternative food sourcing. So, yeah, I now refer to that night as the meat test. Every once in a while I think about how close I came to eating trash meat without knowing it. Honestly, I probably did. And what freaks me out most is how proud he was. Not even ashamed, not even trying to lie. like it was a badge of honor. Moral of the story: if someone says they've got a family recipe, maybe ask a few more questions, especially if their fridge hums like it's hiding secrets. Okay, so here's the thing. I wasn't even supposed to go on that date with Julia. My cousin was the one who actually matched with her first, but he flaked and sent her my way like she was a leftover pizza slice. I didn't expect anything from it, just figured we'd get coffee or something awkward and call it a day. But when we met, I was like, damn, she was cool. Chill voice, great hair, knew random trivia about old cartoons I hadn't thought about in years. It felt weirdly easy. We ended up hanging out 3 times in the first week, not even in a romantic rush way. Just long walks, late night food runs, music swaps, stuff like that. She had this confidence that wasn't loud, just very sure of herself. She even called me out on using the word vibes too much, and she was right. She was the first person I'd met in a while who didn't feel like they were trying to say things just to sound interesting. At least that's what I thought. Third date, we're at this cozy Indian spot that's basically lit by fairy lights and smelling like heaven, and she gets all serious like she's about to confess to a crime or tell me she has a kid or something. I'm already bracing for a classic twist. Instead, she just drops this line, real casual like she's saying the weather's nice. Oh, how she'd been following my mom on social media for weeks. Like, before she even met me. At first, I thought maybe she meant she saw a random post of hers in a comment thread or something. But nope, she meant full on followed. Had been scrolling my mom's Facebook and Instagram for a while, liking pictures from like 2018. She even told me she visited my mom's work once. She looked it up, found where she was based, and gone there, just to see what kind of energy she gave off. Now, I was sitting there with a spoon halfway to my mouth, staring at this girl across the table who just admitted to pre-gating my mom harder than she pre-gated me. And she's not even saying it like it's creepy. She's saying it like it's romantic, like some kind of next level dedication. And I wish I could say I immediately got up and walked out or told her she was out of line. But I didn't. I just kind of sat there in this weird haze, pretending to eat my biryani while trying to piece it together in my head. Why my mom? Why not just look me up like a normal stalker? Turns out she'd seen me tagged in a friend's post and recognized the last name. My mom's got kind of a unique name, and she's pretty active online with her craft projects and gardening videos, so I guess it wasn't that hard to track her down. What really weirded me out wasn't just that she looked, it's that she kept going back. She told me my mom had this glow that made her curious about what kind of home I must have grown up in. She even complimented my mom's fashion sense like we were talking about a celebrity. And I know there's this trend now of deep diving into someone's digital life before meeting them, but this felt way beyond that. She wasn't just looking for red flags. She was making a whole storyline in her head before even knowing what my voice sounded like. The part that really knocked the wind out of me, though, when she told me she went to the library where my mom works, said she just wanted to feel a place. She didn't talk to her or anything. At least, that's what she claimed. Just walked around, sat near the front desk for a bit, browsed a few shelves, and left. Just wanted to see the world you came from, she said, like she was studying a museum exhibit. So now I'm just trying to act like everything's normal while I'm sitting across from a girl who's visited my mom's job like it's a tourist attraction. After dinner, we took a walk and it was kind of quiet. She kept asking if I thought it was sweet or intense, and I didn't even know how to answer. I mean, it was both in the worst way. Like, yeah, it's sweet that she cared enough to look into my background, but also she went out of her way to enter my life from the side door before I even opened the front one. I told her I needed a few days to think about stuff, and she nodded like she understood. She texted me later that night a photo of a plant my mom had posted on her story with a caption, "Your mom's aesthetic is goals." I didn't even reply. The next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every notification I got from Instagram made me feel weird. I actually messaged my mom and casually asked if she had ever seen any unfamiliar girls around the library, and she just said, all the time, which wasn't helpful. I didn't tell her the whole thing because I didn't even know how to explain it without sounding like I was making it up. I didn't block Julia or anything. I just kind of drifted out. She messaged me once more after that, asking if she'd gone too far, and I never answered. It wasn't even about being mad or freaked out at that point. It was more like I suddenly saw this whole relationship backwards, like she had built this idea of me that wasn't real, based on filtered photos of my mom's herb garden and random captions from years ago. And I didn't know how to live up to something that was never really about me in the first place. Sometimes I still see her name pop up on Instagram if we have mutual likes on posts. She's still around, still active, still commenting on baking tutorials and plant accounts. Part of me wonders if she moved on to the next guy and is now studying his dad's LinkedIn page like it's a memoir. But I don't really care. What I care about now is keeping my personal life offline a little more. Not because I've got anything to hide, just because I never expected someone to use my mom's book club selfies as a dating strategy. Anyway, that's the story of how I accidentally dated someone who got to know my mom before she got to know me. Weirdest part, my mom would have probably liked her.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I gotta start this by saying I wasn't even looking for anything serious when I met Inti. I was coming off this dry spell, not even a heartbreak, just this stretch of nothing. You know that weird, dusty part of your dating life where everyone seems like a recycled version of someone else? That's where I was. Then Inti shows up out of nowhere like some surprise download. He was cool though, like the kind of cool that doesn't try hard. Dressed like he thrifted with intention. Made really specific playlists with bands I've never heard of but somehow still liked. Said stuff like moon feelings when he was talking about late night moods. It was kind of corny but also worked. His vibe was soft-spoken confidence, real soft. You almost missed it if you weren't paying attention. Anyway, we met at this outdoor open mic thing. My friend was performing and dragged me along, and I ended up standing next to Inti by accident. He offered me some of his gas station wine and asked me if I believed in emotional astrology. Not real astrology. Emotional astrology. Which is apparently when you feel like a Scorpio even though you're a Libra. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant either, but he made it sound like something worth thinking about. We hung out a few times and honestly, it was good. He cooked for me lots of mushrooms and weird pastas. We'd sit on his floor because he didn't have a couch, just this giant woven blanket that looked like it belonged to someone's grandma and someone's cult leader at the same time. He talked a lot about patterns and connections, and he listened like he was taking notes in his head. After a month, he asked if I wanted to move in. Not like, hey, we should think about living together someday, but straight up, I have space, you can live here. I thought it was fast, but he spun it into this whole we're breaking societal timing rules kind of thing, and for a second I was like, maybe that's okay. Like maybe it's cool to do something wild. Rent was getting annoying anyway, and I was spending half my time at his place already. So yeah, I said yes. I brought over my stuff the next week. 3 duffel bags, my guitar, a crate of books, and some random plants. Felt light. It was kind of exciting, like camping but with plumbing. At first, nothing felt weird. The apartment was small, just a 1-bedroom with big windows and mismatched curtains. He had a ton of candles and little trinkets on every surface. Nothing really matched, but it had a vibe. A little too many mirrors, maybe, but I didn't question it. Then one afternoon, I was looking for duct tape. I'd broken a lamp trying to plug my charger in behind it and wanted to fix it before he got back. I opened this little closet near the hallway I hadn't noticed before. It looked like a normal door, wooden, kind of stiff, but the handle was wobbly and the light switch next to it didn't work. So I pushed the door open, and yeah, it was like stepping into someone else's brain. A weird, messy, obsessive part of it. The room was dark at first, but the curtains were half open, and once my eyes adjusted, I could see everything. There were photos, not just a few, hundreds, all printed, all pinned or taped or thumbtacked on the walls, lined up in rows. Some were in old wooden frames like they mattered. Some just stuck up like someone was gonna reorganize them, but never got around to it. They were all women. Different people, different times. Smiling, standing, laughing, crying, some asleep. Some clearly taken with them knowing. Some absolutely not. Some were selfies, some screenshots from video calls, some clearly ripped from social media. And every single one had a tiny note attached, sometimes on the photo, sometimes on the tag underneath. Things like, honest until March. Didn't like when I went silent. Loyalty, 6 out of 10. Disappeared after fight over Sue. Stayed through the November spiral. It was like he was keeping stats, a catalog, a weird visual spreadsheet of every person he'd ever dated or been with or obsessed over. And I was just standing there, blinking at walls full of ghosts. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until I heard the front door open. He called out my name like nothing was wrong, like it was a regular afternoon. I didn't even answer. I just shut the door quietly and walked out of the hallway like I'd been grabbing a hoodie or something. He was in the kitchen, cutting up mangoes and humming to some jazz lou. I told him I was going to the store real quick and left without even grabbing my shoes. I didn't come back. He texted me an hour later asking where I'd gone. I said I needed some space to think. He sent back a long paragraph about how people misunderstand memory work. That's what he called it. Said the room was a safe place for emotional archiving. Said he believed people deserve to be remembered completely, including their faults. Said he wasn't hiding it from me, just waiting for the right time to show it. I never answered. I packed up my stuff the next day while he was at his studio and left the key under his ugly ceramic turtle on the porch. What stuck with me most wasn't even the room. It was the fact that he'd invited me to live there while that room existed, while all those people were staring from the walls with their stories half-labeled. Like I was next in line for the photo wall, like my label was already half-written. The weirdest part, he wasn't even angry, just disappointed. Told me later in a voice note that I'd failed the transparency threshold, that I didn't have the emotional stamina to handle a full-spectrum connection, whatever that means. I changed my number a week later, moved in with my cousin temporarily, bought my own duct tape. I didn't even really want to date again when I met Paulina. I was in that post-break zone where you're mostly just tired of explaining your favorite color to strangers and pretending you love hiking. But I met her at a night market randomly. She was working a booth that sold handmade earrings shaped like tiny sandwiches, and I stopped because I thought they were magnets. She laughed and said I had magnet energy, whatever that means. She was funny, in a dry way. Smarter than me, honestly. She didn't flirt like most people do. There was no act. She just asked real questions, said what she thought, didn't sugarcoat anything. So when she gave me her number, I saved it in my phone as Sandwich Girl, thinking maybe I'd text her and maybe I wouldn't. But I did, and we clicked. We started going out. She liked quiet stuff. Drive-ins, playing cards on the hood of her car, rewatching weird documentaries with dumb voiceovers. And she loved diners, like obsessively. That's what she wanted to do on Fridays. This one diner downtown with green booths and syrup bottles that never get cleaned properly. I thought it was quirky. Old school. We'd sit in the same booth, order the same thing. She got pancakes, I got whatever had hash browns. She always wore this red hoodie like it was her uniform. The waitresses knew her. The cook waved once. I figured she was just a regular. Some people get attached to routines like that. I didn't think too much of it. But after the third Friday, something weird happened. She got real quiet halfway through eating, then looked over my shoulder and smiled like she saw a friend. I turned around, didn't recognize anyone. Just a tall dude in an apron bringing out food to table 6. After we left, she said, kind of offhand, "That's crazy, I didn't think he still worked here." I asked who she meant, and she just said, "Oh, no one." But then she said it again the next week, like almost the exact same line. "Didn't think he still worked here." And this time I paid more attention. Same guy, long hair tied up, glasses, beard. Didn't really look at us, but something about her body language changed whenever he was nearby. She sat up straighter. She twirled her spoon a certain way. She did this exaggerated laugh at my bad joke that I knew wasn't that funny. That's when I started getting this weird gut feeling. Next Friday rolls around. We sit down, and the same thing happens. She keeps glancing at him, then back at me. At one point she says, "You're such a good listener," out loud while locking eyes with him, even though I hadn't said anything for 5 minutes. The dude doesn't say a word, just walks past with plates. After that, I couldn't unsee it. Week 5, I confront her, not in a dramatic way. Just ask casually who the guy is. She plays dumb like she can't tell who I'm talking about. Then suddenly she remembers. "Oh, that's Jonah. We dated forever ago. Barely even talk now, says it like it means nothing." Then she changes the subject and starts asking me about my childhood. But here's the thing. Once you know something's off, it gets louder. I started noticing more patterns. She'd always time our bathroom breaks so that we left right when he was refilling drinks at nearby tables. She'd wear something new but throw the red hoodie over it like a weird costume. She smiled too hard when he was close. Her jokes got sharper. Her laugh got louder. Everything she did seemed designed for an audience of one. So I did something I'm not proud of. The next week, I got there early. I sat at a corner table alone and watched. Sure enough, she walked in 10 minutes later, didn't see me, and sat in our booth. Alone. She looked around, pulled her phone out, then put it away. 5 minutes later, the guy walked by. She perked up, fixed her hair, tapped the table. And I watched as she did this thing where she accidentally dropped her fork. And when he bent down to grab it, she made some kind of joke I couldn't hear but could tell she thought was clever. He smiled, then walked off like it was routine, like he'd done this before. That's when I knew. It wasn't about me. It never really was. I was a prop in her performance, the stand-in boyfriend she brought to this diner every week so she could accidentally run into her ex and show him she'd moved on. Maybe to hurt him. Maybe to win him back. Maybe just because she liked being watched. I didn't go over. I just got up and left. She texted me 30 minutes later asking where I was. I said I wasn't feeling great. She replied, "That's okay. Jonah asked I was alone today, lol," with a heart emoji. So that was it. I didn't even respond. She called me a couple days later, left a voicemail that was mostly laughing and saying she hoped I wasn't mad. Like it was a game. Like I was part of a play and forgot my lines. I never called her back. But about a month later, I went back to that diner on a random Tuesday night with a friend. Different vibe. No red hoodie in sight. But guess who was working? Jonah. He recognized me but didn't say anything. Just nodded and refilled our waters like a pro. When we left, I asked the hostess if that red hoodie girl still came in. She smiled and said every Friday, like clockwork. Always has a new guy with her. Poor Jonah. And now I can't eat pancakes without thinking about how I was basically a stage prop in someone else's petty revenge show. I don't even know why I said yes to Brad in the first place. Maybe it was because he reminded me of this guy I had a crush on back in high school who played guitar but never tuned it. Or maybe I was just bored. And his bio said something about being really good at trivia and liking breakfast for dinner, which at the time sounded wholesome. We met at a trivia night my coworker dragged me to. He was the guy loudly correcting people at the next table over, but doing it in this charming way, like he didn't know how annoying he was. He had that overconfident but friendly energy, the kind of guy who opens every conversation with a weird fact about lizards or airplanes. He texted me later that night and said I had a trivia face, which didn't make sense, but somehow got me to smile. We went out for tacos the next week, then again for drinks 2 days later, and things kind of picked up from there. We weren't official or anything. We were still in that early stage where you're just figuring each other out. We hung out maybe 5 or 6 times, movies, random coffee stops, walks where we pretended to be dog people even though neither of us had a dog. He talked a lot, but in a way that kept things moving. I didn't mind listening. It was kind of relaxing not having to carry the whole conversation. Then one day, out of nowhere, he texts me something like, "Hey, do you want to come to my family reunion this weekend?" And I laughed, like actually laughed out loud. I thought he was joking. Who brings someone they've known for like a few weeks to a family reunion? But he followed up with a voice note saying, "I think it'd be fun. No pressure. Just chill vibes. Games, food, lots of uncles." He made it sound casual, like it was just another social hangout. He said it was at his aunt's house and that I wouldn't have to talk to anyone if I didn't want to. I figured, sure, why not? I was free, and worst case scenario, I could fake a phone call and bail early. So I went. He picked me up in his car, had snacks in the cup holder and a playlist labeled family-friendly jams. It was like an hour drive, and he kept telling me stories about his cousins and how competitive they get over cornhole. It sounded kind of sweet. I thought maybe I misjudged the whole thing. Like maybe this was his way of easing me into his life. And maybe, deep down, that's what I wanted too. We pull up to this big 2-story house with a huge front yard full of lawn chairs and kids running around and those giant inflatable water slides. It was a full-blown family reunion. Tables with food, coolers everywhere, matching shirts with their last name on the back. I was already feeling awkward because I obviously didn't know anyone, but I figured I'd just stick near Brad and be polite. We get out of the car, and before I can even introduce myself to anyone, Brad's already walking me over to this group of older people and saying, "This is her. This is the one I told you about. My future wife." Dead serious. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but nobody else laughed. His aunt literally hugged me and said, "Oh my God, we've heard so much about you. He said you were special." I looked at him, waiting for the just kidding moment, but he just kept smiling like this was the most normal thing in the world. He started leading me around, introducing me to everyone like we'd been together for years. I kept getting these pats on the back and side hugs and people asking when the wedding was. It wasn't playful. It was like I've been inserted into a role I didn't audition for. I pulled him aside and said, "What the hell is going on?" And he looked confused, like he genuinely didn't understand why I was freaking out. He said, "Well, we've been hanging out," and I figured, why not just be honest about where this is headed? We'd never even talked about being exclusive. We hadn't had a single conversation about labels or the future. I didn't even know his middle name. And now I'm being introduced to his grandma as his fiancée. He didn't even give me a heads up. Just dropped me into the deep end and expected me to swim like I was thrilled to be there. I spent the next 2 hours trying to dodge questions about how we met, where we were living, what kind of wedding we were planning. I ate a paper plate of undercooked hot dogs and potato salad while some lady I didn't know showed me pictures of Brad as a toddler in a sailor suit. He kept acting like everything was fine, laughing with his cousins, playing horseshoes, coming over to kiss my forehead like we were in some kind of rom-com montage. I was frozen the whole time, like my brain couldn't catch up to what was happening. Eventually, I told him I had a headache and needed to lie down for a bit. He offered to walk me to the guest room like it was his own house. I locked the door behind me, stared at myself in the bathroom mirror for 10 minutes, then climbed out the window and called a ride home. I left him a note, not a dramatic one. Just said, "This is way too much, way too fast, and I never agreed to be your future anything." He texted me that night saying I was being dramatic, said I'd ruined a beautiful moment and embarrassed him in front of his family. He made it sound like I was the one who had crossed a line, like I had broken some sacred family pact we never actually talked about. I never replied. A couple weeks later, I heard from a mutual friend that he told people I got cold feet because I couldn't handle commitment. Said I panicked at the idea of being with someone long term. Honestly, maybe I did panic, but I think most people would if they found out they were suddenly married in someone else's head. You know when you meet someone and they're just normal in a way that makes you feel calm for once. Like not fireworks or chaos or too many shared interests that feel suspicious. Just a person who listens when you talk, doesn't interrupt, and remembers your dog's name. That's what Nina felt like at first. We met through mutual friends at a backyard birthday thing. Plastic chairs, too much smoke from the grill, somebody's Bluetooth speaker skipping. She was wearing this oversized sweater and drinking iced coffee, even though it was 9 p.m. and cold out. I asked her if she was cold, and she said, "Always." That was her whole answer. It made me laugh. Our first few dates were nothing fancy. Walking around the city, splitting bad pizza on a bench, talking about dumb stuff like worst jobs and weird childhood fears. I told her I used to be convinced quicksand was going to be a bigger issue in adult life. She told me she thought thunder could break glass. We were both wrong, obviously, but it felt easy to admit things like that to her. She was smart, sharp in a quiet way. Not the kind of person who talks over you, but definitely the kind who notices what you don't say. She asked a lot of questions, and not in a nosy way, more like she was cataloging things. What kind of music made me feel something, how I reacted to silence, how I sat when I was anxious. She noticed everything. So when she started asking deeper stuff, like past relationships, family stuff, how I dealt with stress, I didn't really hesitate. I told her I'd been in therapy on and off for a while. That I started when I was going through a rough patch 2 years ago, and it helped. Still helps. I told her I wasn't ashamed of it, and I didn't try to make it sound cooler than it was. I figured, if we're gonna date, might as well be real. She nodded a lot when I told her. Didn't say anything weird at the time. Just kind of changed the subject after a bit. I didn't think anything of it. Not then. A few days later, we're hanging out at her place. Just the two of us on her couch watching some slow-moving movie I didn't care about. She paused it out of nowhere, muted the screen, turned to me like she had something heavy to drop. My heart rate went up instantly. That move never leads anywhere good. She says, "I've been thinking about what you said, about therapy." And I go, "Yeah." Then she says, "I just want to be really honest with you because I think honesty is important early on." I was like, okay, cool. Here comes the confession that she's in love with me after 4 dates or something. But nope. She goes, "I don't date guys who go to therapy." Straight face, like she was telling me she doesn't eat mushrooms or something. I just sat there blinking, not even offended yet, just confused. Like, did I mishear her? She said, I know that sounds harsh, but in my opinion, if someone's in therapy, it means they haven't fully dealt with their stuff. I want a partner who's emotionally strong, not still figuring things out. I kept thinking it was some kind of weird test, like say the wrong thing and she was gonna walk out of her own apartment. I asked her what she meant by emotionally strong, and she said something like, people who can handle life without leaning on strangers for answers. That's when it clicked for me. She didn't think therapy was a tool. She thought it was a crutch. She thought needing help made you weak. And then she hit me with a real kicker. She said, if you're still seeing someone about your emotions, maybe you were just not a good match, unless you're willing to stop. That's when I started getting mad. Not yelling mad, not even defensive. Just that slow boil like your brain is trying to keep up with the sheer audacity in front of you. I asked her, so you'd rather date someone who bottles everything up and pretends they're fine all the time? And she said, well, not pretend. Just be fine. I couldn't even explain how messed up that sounded. I didn't know how to condense everything I'd learned, all the work I'd done, into one calm response. I just sat there on her couch, feeling like I'd walked into a trap disguised as a date. She wasn't even mad. That's the weird part. She said it all like she was being helpful, like she was giving me a heads up on the kind of man she needed me to become. I told her I wasn't going to stop going to therapy, that it was part of how I stay sane, especially in a world where people pretend being numb is strength. She didn't argue, just nodded again, like she was disappointed but not surprised. Then she said, I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I didn't. I left her apartment that night without slamming the door or saying anything dramatic, just left. Walked home for an hour even though I could have taken the train. Tried to process how someone who seemed so tuned in could be so wrong about something that mattered. I didn't text her after that. She sent one message a few days later that just said, hope you're doing well. No hard feelings. I didn't answer. Not because I was mad, but because I didn't have the energy to explain myself to someone who didn't want to understand me in the first place. The wild part, I actually felt more grateful for therapy after that. Because past me probably would have tried to justify myself, would have tried to win her over, would have said, okay, maybe I can stop for a while just to keep someone who didn't get it. But now I know better. If someone tells you your mental health is a deal breaker, believe them. Don't waste time arguing. So this one's a little tricky to talk about, mostly because it starts normal. Not like rom-com quirky or weirdly intense like other stories I've been through. Just normal, which is maybe why it caught me off guard the way it did. I met Jave at my friend Priya's game night. He came with some guy I barely knew, said he just moved to the area and was trying to meet people. I remember he brought this off-brand soda and apologized for it like 3 times, which somehow made it charming. He wasn't loud or flashy, but he had this quiet way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. Not in a fake way either, he really listened. We talked all night, mostly about boring stuff. Jobs, movies, bad roommates. I remember thinking he seemed stable, which at that point in my life was way more attractive than anything else. Like, yeah, a guy with a working phone plan and a clean shirt. Sign me up. So we started hanging out, gradually, no pressure. A couple dates here and there, long texts. He always asked about my day and actually seemed to care about the answer. I told him I worked in communications at a mid-sized tech company. Nothing fancy. Mostly emails, internal messaging, employee events, office-y stuff. I liked it enough to not be miserable. He said he was doing freelance project management but was looking for something more permanent. About a month in, we were getting pretty close. We hadn't had any serious talks yet about labels or futures or whatever, but we were seeing each other often enough that it felt like we were heading there. I was starting to get comfortable around him, like truly relaxed, which isn't always easy for me. Then one night, we were sitting in my kitchen eating takeout and talking about jobs again. He mentioned he had an interview the next day. I said good luck, asked where it was, and he just smiled and said, you'll see, which I thought was maybe a flirty joke or something. I didn't press it. I figured maybe he didn't want to jinx it. The next morning I get to work, open up my email, and there's this announcement from HR about a new hire starting next week. And guess whose name was in it? Yep, Javed. I stared at the screen for like a full minute, just frozen. It wasn't even the fact that he got the job. It was where the job was, at my company. In my department, he was literally going to be working under me, as in I would be his direct supervisor. I texted him immediately, just a casual, "Hey, so you got the job?" And he replied with surprise, like it was a birthday party. I asked him when he applied, and he finally admitted he'd applied weeks ago, before we even went on our third date. He found a listing on the company site, realized it was my company, and decided not to tell me because he didn't want to ruin the vibe. Didn't want to ruin the vibe. It got worse. I asked him why he didn't say anything once we started getting closer, and he told me he was afraid I'd overthink it, and that I should take it as a compliment. That he liked me and respected my professional world. That's how he framed it, like this was some kind of beautiful overlap. Meanwhile, I'm sitting at my desk realizing that the guy I've been dating has essentially maneuvered his way into my job space without even asking if I'd be okay with it. And I'd be the one doing his performance reviews, signing off on his deadlines, approving or denying his vacation days. I brought it up in person that night, and he got defensive real fast. Said I was being dramatic, that it wasn't that he got hired because of me, that he still had to go through the interviews and pass the assessments, and that he did it all without my help, as if that made it better. He kept saying, it's not like I lied, which technically, yeah, he didn't say anything untrue, but he left a lot out on purpose. That's a kind of lying too. The more I thought about it, the more it felt calculated, not even necessarily malicious, just strategic. Like he saw my job as a good opportunity and me as a bonus. And that stung more than anything. Not that he wanted the job, but that he wanted the job with me attached without thinking about how that would affect me. When he officially started the next week, it was weird from the jump. Everyone in the department knew we'd been seeing each other. We weren't public, but office gossip spreads faster than a meme. Every meeting we were in together felt like walking on glass. People watched us more closely, whispered more. I had to overcorrect just to not seem biased, and that made everything more tense. We tried to keep it going for a little while. I thought maybe we could separate work from personal life, be adults about it. But every time I gave him feedback, even the tiniest thing, he took it personally. Accused me of bringing the relationship into work. Meanwhile, he'd casually flirt with me during meetings or make jokes he thought were cute but just made things worse. It all fell apart about 3 weeks in. We had a one-on-one where I had to address a missed deadline, and he straight up said, "Wow, guess I'm not boyfriend material or employee material." I couldn't even respond. I ended the meeting early and walked outside just to breathe. That night, I told him it wasn't going to work. Not the job thing, not the dating thing. I needed space. Needed to feel like my job was my own again. He acted surprised, like he thought I'd just accept the mess and keep smiling. We haven't talked since. He still works there, but in a different team now. I see him in the hallway sometimes. We nod. That's it. The whole thing taught me something weird. That you can know someone and still have no clue what they're capable of justifying in their own head. And that sometimes it's not the lie that ruins things. It's the decision to keep the truth in their back pocket and only pull it out when it's too late. I probably should notice something was off the first time Missa told me her favorite sound was the click of a phone recording starting. She said it when we were sitting in her car, parked outside this cool 24-hour donut place, passing a bag of jelly fillets back and forth. I thought she was joking, like how people say they love the sound of rain or cats purring. I even laughed. She didn't. We met at a bookstore, which sounds cute, but it wasn't romantic or anything. I was crouched in the self-help section trying to look like I wasn't holding in a sneeze, and she bumped into me reaching for a book about emotional intelligence. She made some joke about building her final form, and we just ended up talking. She had this sharp, kind of restless energy, like she was always trying to finish your sentence for you. I liked it. It was the kind of fast-talking confidence that made you feel like you were in a movie. I didn't think to ask what kind of movie. First few dates were chill. A lot of walking around the city, sharing fries, talking about the way people's childhoods messed them up without them knowing. Deep stuff, but not in an exhausting way. She liked to analyze things, people, movies, relationships, everything. I figured that just meant she was thoughtful. I'm big on communication, so I thought it was a win. What I didn't realize was that Missa wasn't just thinking about our conversations. She was documenting them. It started small. She'd bring up things I said days earlier with a kind of word-for-word accuracy that made me pause. I'd say something like, yeah, I probably take too long to let things go. And 2 days later, she'd be like, you said exactly that on Tuesday at 3:43 when we were in the car, and the /C was broken. I thought you just had a freakish memory. One night we were hanging out at her place watching some documentary about cult leaders, and she goes, I played our conversation from Tuesday for my friend Kira. She said your tone sounded insecure. I blinked. Thought maybe she meant she was retelling the convo, like in a recap kind of way. But no, she had played the actual audio. She told me super casually that she records important conversations in her life. Said it helps her reflect and check if people are being consistent. I asked her if she told the people she was recording. She said, I don't have to. It's not illegal in this state. That was her explanation, that it was legal. I stared at her for a while trying to decide if I was overreacting. Part of me wanted to brush it off. Maybe she just recorded one or two things and was being really honest about it. But then she pulled out her phone and showed me the app she uses. It was full. Dozens of recordings. Some labeled by date. Others had titles like he said he doesn't like confrontation. And is this a red flag? I was in at least 10 of them. It felt like being spied on, but with a smile. Like if someone robbed your house but left a thank you note and cleaned your kitchen. I told her that wasn't okay with me. That if I'm talking to her in private, I expect it to stay private. She just stared at me like I was being Maeve. Said she doesn't use them to hurt people, just to get clarity. Said I'd thank her later when we avoided a huge fight because she caught something early. I didn't thank her. I left. Told myself I was done, blocked her number, and tried to shake it off like a weird fluke. The problem was she didn't stop. She emailed me 2 days later with an MP3 file titled Thursday Parking Lot Conversation. I didn't open it, obviously, but the fact that she sent it like a gift, like a peace offering, told me everything I needed to know. That this wasn't about communication, it was control. She wanted to catch people in moments where they said something slightly off, then dissect it later with her little jury of friends. She didn't just want to connect, she wanted proof. Like the only way she could trust what you said was if she could replay it for an audience and study it like a lab experiment. I kept wondering what she'd read about me before we even met. If she pulled old tweets, searched for clips of podcasts I'd done, stalked LinkedIn voice interviews. Wouldn't even be surprised. She had the vibe of someone who preps for a date like it's a job interview. I thought back to our earlier talks, how calm she seemed when I said vulnerable stuff. Now I realized she probably wasn't calm. She was just hitting record and planning her group debrief later. That's what creeped me out the most. Not just the betrayal, but the idea that every sincere thing I said was maybe followed up by 10 strangers laughing or judging it on speakerphone. I didn't reply to her email. She followed it up with another one the next week that just said, I think you're letting fear speak for you. Like she was still doing the analysis, still trying to win a debate I never signed up for. After that, I changed my number. Sometimes I wonder how many recordings she has of other people. If she's got whole folders labeled by first names. Maybe her phone's like a digital graveyard of half relationships, all sorted by emotional tone and background noise. And I wonder if she ever just talks to someone without hitting record. I doubt it. Anyway, that's the story of how I ended up dating a human surveillance device in a red hoodie who believed trust should come with evidence. My biggest mistake was thinking someone that observant was just being kind. Turns out she was building a case file. I swear, the older I get, the weirder dating apps feel. Like every profile starts to blur into one big pile of people standing in mirrors with gym lighting, holding dogs that probably aren't even theirs, claiming they love adventure, but somehow still live with their mom. So when I matched with Killian, I didn't expect much. He didn't look like my usual type. His profile pic was him standing on top of a hill with wind blowing his hoodie sideways, looking way too intense for someone who was just in the middle of a hike. But he messaged first, which already made him stand out, and he didn't say something dumb like "er pretty." He said, "You seem rounded," which threw me. No one says that. I was curious. First date was chill. Coffee and a walk by the lake. He talked a lot about nature and stuff like personal systems. He said he builds systems for himself to live better, like organizing his week into color-coded categories, meal prepping by vitamin levels, and using 3 different alarm clocks for waking up emotionally versus physically. It was a lot, but he said it all with this calm vibe, like he genuinely believed it helped him function. I thought, all right, maybe he's just one of those hyper-organized people who thrives on structure. Could be worse. Second date, he cooked for me. Everything was labeled in his kitchen. Literally everything. His fridge had stickers like cold proteins, cooked grains, green veg. His spices were in alphabetical order, and he had this whiteboard calendar with intentions written for each week. One of them said, "Practice sustainable affection." I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't ask. He was polite and tense, but still kind of warm. He'd ask stuff like, "Do you feel seen in your day-to-day life?" Like, who asks that? But it made me think. He made me think. I liked that. It wasn't romantic yet, but it was different. He seemed focused, like he had a plan for everything. Then came the third date. We were sitting on his couch. He had brewed this tea that was supposed to lower emotional static, and we were talking about how people lose trust in relationships. He got real serious out of nowhere, paused, and said, "Okay, so this is something I ask everyone I date." I'm thinking, all right, here comes some deep question about attachment styles or trauma bonding or whatever. Instead, he opens his phone, scrolls for a second, and shows me an app I've never seen before. He says, "I use this to track location in relationships. You'd be on it, and I'd be on yours too. Total transparency. It builds trust." I blinked. He goes on like it's no big deal. Says that knowing where someone is removes anxiety, prevents miscommunication, and eliminates suspicion at the root. Like I'm hearing him talk about vitamins again. Like this is just another system. No emotion in his voice. Just logic. I asked him if he was joking. He said no. That every girl he's dated seriously has agreed to it, and it really helped them bond. I tried to laugh it off. Said something like, "That's a little intense, don't you think?" He shook his head. Said it's only intense if you have something to hide. And that's when the mood flipped. Not all at once. But something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. He started explaining how the app works, real-time location sharing, 24/7 updates, alerts if you go somewhere off routine. You could set zones, track arrivals and departures, even get movement history by day. He said it like he was describing his favorite new playlist. I asked him what would happen if I didn't want to do that. He shrugged and said, "Then we're not aligned. That's a boundary for me." He used that word, boundary, like a shield. Like if he just framed it right, I wouldn't be allowed to feel creeped out. That if it was his boundary, then me saying no was me crossing the line. I told him I wasn't comfortable being tracked. That I didn't want to know where he was all the time either. That I liked my space, and I didn't want to feel like I was in a relationship with a GPS. He said space was a myth. That couples create distance to hide behind. That if you're serious about someone, you should want them to know everything. At that point, I realized we weren't just on different pages. We weren't even in the same book. I left shortly after. Said I had a morning thing. He offered to walk me to my car and looked disappointed when I declined. I told him I'd text when I got home. I didn't. He texted the next day with a message that read like a PowerPoint slide. Said he respected my stance, but he was looking for a partnership built on accountability. Said if I changed my mind, the invitation was still open. I didn't reply. Over the next couple weeks, I'd get these messages from him randomly. One said, "Transparency is the seed of love." Another just said, "Would it feel different if the app was framed as safety instead of control?" He was still trying to rebrand it, still trying to spin it into something logical and clean. But it wasn't. It was creepy. Eventually, I blocked him. I told a friend about it, and she said he sounded like a tech cult leader who just hadn't started the cult yet. And yeah, it did kind of feel like that. Like if I'd stuck around, the next step would have been daily check-ins and a binder labeled emotional metrics. Now, every time I see someone mention full transparency in their bio, I swipe left instantly. There's a difference between honesty and surveillance, between trust and submission. He never saw it. Probably still doesn't. So that's the story of the guy who thought love meant being trackable like a package. All I wanted was someone I could share fries in silence with. What I got was an attempted merger with a personal tracking firm disguised as a human man. It started with a shared charger. I was at this co-working spot downtown that sells overpriced smoothies and plays indie music nobody actually listens to, and I couldn't find an outlet. Lauren offered to let me plug into her power strip. That's it. That's how this whole thing started, with a dying battery and some good timing. She was working on her laptop and drinking a lavender iced coffee that looked like it should have been illegal. She had this kind of calm confidence, like someone who always knew where their passport was. I asked what she was working on, and she said, something boring but profitable. I liked that answer. She didn't try to impress me, just told the truth and kept typing. We started seeing each other pretty quickly after that. Our first date was one of those long, aimless walks that accidentally turns into dinner and then dessert. I read somewhere that people who can walk and talk together without checking their phones are more likely to actually connect. I don't know if that's science, but it felt true with her. Lauren wasn't loud or clingy or dramatic. She was thoughtful. Made killer playlists. She texted like someone who actually meant it, not just out of boredom. We'd sit on my couch eating dumplings and making fun of bad reality shows, and it always felt good. Chill. Comfortable. We'd been going out for a while, nothing too heavy, but definitely more than casual. I wasn't seeing anyone else, and I didn't think she was either. We never had the what are we talk, but the vibe was solid. We were both just coasting, which was fine by me. Then one weekend, she mentioned she was heading home to visit her family. Her parents lived about 2 hours away, nothing dramatic. I told her to have fun. She said she'd text me, and that was that. She left Friday, came back Sunday, and we met Monday for lunch. I don't know how it came up. I think we were talking about weird family traditions or something, and she casually mentioned that when she's home, she still shares a bed with her twin brother. I thought I misheard her. She said it like she was telling me her family still does matching pajamas at Christmas or eats pancakes for dinner every Thursday. Totally normal voice. She even kind of laughed like she expected me to think it was cute. I didn't laugh. I just sat there blinking. She saw my face and asked what was wrong. I told her, as gently as I could, that I thought it was different. Not judging, just surprised. She looked confused, like I was the one being weird. She said they'd always done it. That growing up, they shared a room, and that when she visits now, she still sleeps in the same bed because it's just more comfortable. Said their house isn't big, and it doesn't make sense to sleep on the floor or in a weird old guest bed when there's a perfectly good mattress right there. I asked if they had other options. She said, yeah, there's a couch in a spare room, but she doesn't like those. Too dusty, too cold, too far from the bathroom. Her bed with her brother, she said, just feels natural. Natural. At that point, I didn't even know how to respond without sounding like I was accusing her of something. She wasn't being creepy. She wasn't being secretive. She was being totally honest, but honest in a way that made my brain short-circuit. I've got siblings. We shared backseats on road trips, shared blankets on the couch, but that's different. That's like temporary discomfort. You don't keep doing that when you're grown and have options. I tried to explain how it sounded from the outside, that it might come off strange. She looked genuinely offended. Said people only think it's weird because society's hyper-sexualized everything. She said she and her brother are just close. That it's a twin thing. That people who don't get it are probably insecure. So now I'm the insecure one for thinking two grown adults, biological twins, maybe shouldn't still be cuddling up in the same bed when they visit home. I didn't want to blow up the whole thing right there, so I dropped it, changed the subject, ate my fries. But the thought wouldn't leave my head. It just stayed. That night I told my roommate, and he literally dropped his sandwich. Said, nope, knew, that's a line. I asked a couple other people too, just to check if I was overreacting. Everyone had the same response. Weird. Definitely weird. Still, I try to keep it cool. I told myself not to let it define her. She wasn't doing anything wrong, just unusual. Everyone has quirks. I mean, I used to bite the inside of my cheek during movies until it bled. That's not great either. But over the next couple weeks, the weirdness kept creeping in. She mentioned little things, inside jokes with her brother, how he always knows what she's thinking, how they'd never fought about anything, how they still sometimes fall asleep during movies when he visits her. I started seeing this invisible thread between them that I wasn't part of. Like no matter how close I got to her, there'd always be this locked door in the house of her life, and her brother had the only key. We weren't even officially dating, but I started pulling back, not costing her, just less energy. Fewer plans, she noticed. Asked me straight up if it was about what she told me. I didn't lie. I told her, yeah, kind of, that I couldn't shake it, that it made me uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to be okay with it without pretending. She told me that made me small-minded, said the problem was in me, not in her family, that I clearly never known closeness without guilt. That was the last time we talked. I still think about her sometimes. She really was smart, funny, kind. But also she shared a bed with her brother like it was a sleepover that never ended. And that's something I just couldn't unsee. So I met Kyle on accident. Not like oops, wrong swipe kind of accident. More like I was covering a shift for a friend at her bar, and he came in asking for a drink that sounded made up. Something like a coconut old-fashioned, which, by the way, is disgusting. But he said it with confidence, like he knew something I didn't, and I was too tired to argue. He tipped well and sat at the end of the bar reading a book about body language. That should have been my first clue. He came in a few more times after that. Same seat, same book, same drink. We got talking. He wasn't super outgoing, but he had this dry way of talking that made me laugh. Kind of like he was always halfway in on a joke only he got. After the third visit, he asked for my number. It felt easy, so I gave it to him. Our first hangout was low-key. Coffee, then walking around this park with way too many geese. He told me he worked in finance but hated it. Said he only did it because it gave him data to work with. At the time, I didn't ask what he meant. Thought he was just being vague on purpose, like some people are when they're trying to seem more interesting than they are. I should have asked. We kept seeing each other over the next few weeks. He always showed up on time, always planned stuff ahead. Never forgot a detail. If I mentioned liking a specific song, it would magically show up in his car playlist the next time we drove somewhere. If I said I liked a certain dish, he'd find the best version of it within 5 miles for us to try next time. I figured he was just really attentive. Or one of those guys who tries extra hard early on. Whatever. I wasn't mad about it. But there was something off about him. Not in a scary way. Just mechanical. Like he'd study how to date instead of just learning through doing it. His compliments felt scripted, like he read them off a Reddit thread titled Things Girls Like to Hear. I told myself maybe he was just awkward. Maybe he was one of those people who needs a little structure to feel safe. It all kind of blew open one night when we were hanging at his place. He'd ordered Thai food and was playing some old school funk playlist he said was scientifically the best genre to boost mood. Again, weirdly specific, but fine. We were halfway through eating when I knocked over a glass of water on his coffee table, and while we were cleaning it up, I moved one of his notebooks out of the way. It was closed, but the front said, Date Tracker. I made a dumb joke like, that's not creepy at all, and he just kind of laughed. Then he said, you actually rank pretty high. I thought he was king. He wasn't. He opened his laptop and showed me this spreadsheet like he was showing me his favorite meme. It was color-coded, had tabs, and was broken down by name, date, key personality traits, and a column labeled Request Receptiveness. I asked what that meant, and he said it was his way of tracking how open people were to certain things he brought up, where to eat, what movie to watch, how they responded to new ideas, how long they took to say yes to stuff. And yes, I had a row. It had my name the first day we met, and a summary that read like a Yelp review. Quick to laugh, prefers casual over structured plans. Hesitant with new foods, highly verbal. I wish I was making that up. I told him that was weird, that people aren't test subjects, that it felt like he was doing a lab study instead of getting to know someone for real. He looked genuinely surprised, said, but it's not a secret, it's just data. Like that made it fine. Like me talking about it was supposed to make it less gross. Then he added, it's just how I process compatibility. Most people aren't honest with themselves, so I need objective markers. I was sitting on his couch trying to understand if this dude was serious. He really thought of dating like a performance review. Like we were all auditioning, and he was the guy with the clipboard in the back grading us. I asked him what he did with all that information. He said he used it to avoid mismatches. Said if someone scored low on conflict tolerance, he wouldn't try to have hard conversations with them. If someone scored high on predictable routines, he'd avoid spontaneity. It was like he'd invented a manual for dating where people were just stats. He even had an average column at the bottom, like some twisted version of fantasy football. I asked him if the girls knew. He said no. It would affect their behavior if they did. I told him that was manipulation. He said it was optimization. That's when I grabbed my jacket. He didn't try to stop me, just said, You're probably going to overreact to this later, but if you ever want to see where you really ranked, I'll show you the final tab. Final tab. I didn't ask. I left. The next day, he texted me a long message explaining how he respects me, that I was in the top 3 percentile, and that this reaction was exactly what the column predicted. I blocked him. I don't think he's evil. I think he's one of those people who's so scared of messing up that you'd rather turn every interaction into a system he can measure. But people aren't formulas. We change. We react. We mess up. And that's what makes us human. Kyle wasn't dating people. He was tracking them. And once I realized I was part of a spreadsheet, it didn't matter how high I ranked. I was done. This one still makes me cringe when I think about it, and not even because it was the most dramatic day I've ever been on, but because it came out of nowhere. Like, one minute we were laughing about how overpriced sparkling water is, and the next, she's crying into a cloth napkin because I didn't let her order my food. Yeah, that's the story. So I met Jenna through a mutual friend who was convinced we'd be a great match because you're both old souls with food opinions. That should have been a red flag. People who say stuff like that usually mean you're both picky and intense, so why not combine the chaos? But I went along with it anyway. We met for drinks at this rooftop spot downtown. Nothing fancy. She showed up in this massive coat that made her look like she was smuggling throw pillows, and I immediately liked her vibe. She talked with her hands a lot and had this kind of sharp wit that made every story sound more interesting than it probably was. She had this way of staring at you while you talked that made you feel like you were being paid attention to, like really see. First date was solid, no notes. Second date, we went to a flea market and ended up splitting this weird Belgian waffle sandwich thing. Again, good time. She had strong opinions about ketchup, and I was into it. She texted me after saying she'd had a genuinely refreshing time, which is the kind of thing you only say if you've been on a string of truly awful dates. I felt the same. So by the third date, I thought we were hitting that stage where things could maybe turn into something real. We decided to do dinner this time, something a little more proper. I picked a spot I liked, this Italian place with dim lighting and paper menus that looked like they were printed on someone's home printer. The kind of place where the waiter kneels down to your level to take the order and you pretend not to feel weird about it. We sit down, everything's fine. Bread hits the table, conversation's flowing. She starts telling me about this time she almost moved to Berlin on a dare. I'm sipping my drink, listening, nodding along, totally into it. Then the waiter comes back to take our order. Before I'd even opened my mouth, Jenna jumps in and says, he'll have the veal marsala, no mushrooms, with the tagliatelle on the side. The waiter looks at me. I look at Jenna. I go, actually, I was thinking about the eggplant parm. She freezes. Full stop, like someone just shut the lights off behind her eyes. The waiter awkwardly chuckles and goes, no problem, and starts writing it down. I thank him and hand him the menu. As soon as he walks away, she doesn't say anything right away, which made it worse. She just picks up her water, takes this slow sip like she's building suspense, then puts the glass down like she's in a courtroom. She goes, why didn't you let me order for you? I'm confused. I laugh. I think she's joking. I say something dumb like, didn't know I needed permission to pick dinner. Wrong move. She leans in and says very calmly, I wanted to do that as a way to show that I can lead, that I can make choices for us. I kind of laugh again, still thinking she's exaggerating, trying to play a character or something. But no, her face is dead serious. I try to lighten it a little. I say, it's dinner, not a Senate vote. That's when she breaks. Full on tears. Not loud sobbing, but watery eyes, trembling lip, clutching the napkin like it's a lifeline. And I'm just sitting there, absolutely stunned, wondering how a meal turned into an emotional hostage situation. She tells me, and I kid you not, that the way I dismissed her choice showed her that I don't know how to surrender in a partnership. She says that if I can't let her order for me, that I'm probably going to be controlling. She says that relationships are about power balances, and that she was testing my ability to release control. I say nothing. What do you even say to that? The waiter comes back with our food, sees her crying, gives me the kind of look that says, do you want me to call someone or just bring you the check? He sets the food down gently like it's made of glass and disappears. I try to shift the vibe. I offer her some bread. I say maybe we just had a misunderstanding. that I didn't know she had some deeper meaning behind ordering for me. I try to be calm. I try not to make it worse. She wipes her eyes and says, "It's not just about food. It's about surrender." I try the eggplant. It's overcooked. Go figure. She barely touches her plate, keeps glancing around like she's trying to decide whether to run or stay and fight. I tell her it's okay, that we don't have to keep digging into this, that we can just finish the meal and call it a night. She nods, dats her face, and then, out of nowhere, says, "You failed." I blink. Failed what? She says, "The moment. You failed the moment." I ask for the check. The waiter brings it over like he's walking through a crime scene. I pay. No split, no debate. I just want out. We walk out into the cold, and she hugs me. Full hug, like nothing happened. Then she pulls back and says, "Let me know if you ever want to try again, with less resistance." I never called her. She texted once a week later saying she still believed I had potential and that some lessons just take longer to land. I didn't reply. Sometimes I wonder if she's out there now, still trying to test dudes with pasta orders, waiting for someone to let her pick their dinner so she can call it fate. I'll be real with you. I wasn't even trying to date when I met Ash. I'd just gotten through one of those boring, drawn-out breakups where nothing dramatic happened, but everything just slowly got dull and annoying. Like someone turning the volume down on a song you used to love. So I was off apps, off dating, just doing my thing, eating too many bagels, working late, and binge-watching documentaries about shipwrecks. Then one day I had this random birthday party for a coworker's girlfriend. One of those rooftop setups with way too many fairy lights and a Bluetooth speaker that keeps cutting out. I end up sitting next to this guy with messy hair and a shirt that looked like it cost $3 from a yard sale. He had this chill, lazy grin and said his name was Ash. We started talking because someone brought Funyuns, and we were the only ones eating them. He was easy to talk to, funny, kind of spacey, but sharp in this weird behind-the-scenes way. Like he wouldn't say much for a while and then suddenly drop a one-liner that made everyone laugh too hard. We ended up leaving the party at the same time, and he asked for my number while lighting a cigarette he didn't even smoke. Said it was for the vibe. I didn't get it, but I gave him my number anyway. Our first couple hangouts were great. Casual. He'd text me stuff like, "Let's walk around and pretend we're furniture designers," and I'd say yes. It was that kind of thing. We didn't go on traditional dates. We explored weird bookstores, sat in empty diners, talked about dreams that made no sense. It was fun. He had this way of making the world feel like a scavenger hunt. We were maybe 2 weeks in when I started noticing he was a little intense under the surface. Not in a scary way, just like he'd suddenly say stuff that felt big. Like once we were eating tacos in a parking lot and he goes, "I could see myself trusting you forever." Just that. No setup. No warning. Just dropped out of a casual weather update. I laughed it off and changed the subject, but I didn't forget it. About a week later, we're sitting on his couch watching a movie about con artists. And in the middle of the second act, he pauses it and turns to me with this very serious look, like his whole vibe changed. He says, "Hey, I've been thinking about something, and I just want to run it by you." I'm expecting something heavy. Maybe a family thing, maybe he's got a kid or some kind of secret. But no. He says, "I think we should open a joint bank account." I laughed, full on laughed, thought he was joking. I was waiting for the punchline, but he didn't laugh with me. He goes, "I'm serious. I know it's early, but that's the point. Trust is built by removing boundaries early, not putting them up." I was still trying to figure out if he was messing with me, so I asked, "Why would we need a shared bank account?" And he says, "Not for everything, just a little one, a shared pool, so we can both put in and take out. It's symbolic." Symbolic. I asked him what we'd even be using it for, and he said, "Whatever. Snacks, coffee, gas money, emergency cash, spontaneous adventures. Just something that's ours." I told him that sounded like a great idea for a couple that's been together for a long time, but we barely knew each other. We weren't even exclusive. We didn't have a toothbrush situation yet. He said that's why it mattered. That if we waited to trust each other, we'd just bring fear into everything later. Then he hit me with, "If you don't trust me enough to share money, how will you trust me with anything real later?" That sentence hit me sideways. It wasn't just a red flag. It was like the whole flag factory exploded. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. That trust doesn't have to mean full access to personal finances. He got quiet for a second and then said, I thought you were different. You seemed open. That word, open, suddenly felt like a trap. I tried to keep it civil. I said, this has nothing to do with how I feel about you. It's just too soon. He nodded, but it wasn't a peaceful nod. It was the kind of nod someone gives when they're pretending they get it, but they're actually judging you silently. He didn't bring it up again that night, but the energy was off. The movie stayed paused. I left early. Next day, he texted me a long message about emotional freedom and how money is just a symbol of energy. He said if we couldn't share energy, what were we really doing? He called it energetic misalignment. I'm not making this up. I didn't answer for a while. When I did, I told him I needed to slow things down. Take some space. He said, that's fine, but you're choosing fear over flow. I never texted back after that. I ran into him once a couple months later at a plant sale. He was with some girl who was holding his hand and laughing too loudly at something he said. He waved at me across the aisle like nothing had happened. I just nodded and kept moving. Part of me still doesn't know if he actually believed what he was saying or if it was just a weird manipulation tactic he wrapped in spiritual nonsense. Maybe both. Either way, I now have a strict rule: no shared accounts unless we shared holidays, rent, or at the very least a full flu season together. I don't usually care about small things. I'm not the guy who flips out if someone double dips in the salsa or uses my charger without asking. I'm chill about most stuff, probably too chill, honestly. So when I tell you that the toothbrush thing messed with me more than I expected, I mean it caught me off guard. Because I didn't think that would be the moment where everything cracked open. So yeah, Olivia. We met at a friend's barbecue. She was the one trying to figure out how to open a bottle of Rosa with a house key. I offered to help, and we ended up talking by the grill while someone's toddler kept trying to steal paper plates. She was quick, opinionated, didn't let conversation go flat. I liked her energy right away. She asked for my number first, which I respected. I liked that she didn't pretend to be shy. We started texting that night, and by the next week, we were already hanging out pretty regularly. Olivia was the kind of person who always seemed to be in motion. She talked fast, made spontaneous plans, dragged me into weird little adventures like following a dog we found off leash just to see where it was going. It made life feel less boring. She kept things fun, unpredictable. I was into it. She also started sleeping over pretty early. We didn't talk about it, it just happened. She'd come over after dinner and we'd fall asleep watching dumb shows. No big deal. She kept saying she hated sleeping at her own place because her radiator made noises like it was haunted. The first time I noticed something was off was when I found my toothbrush wet. I'd gone to the bathroom after she left and saw it sitting at a weird angle in the cup. Bristles still damp. I figured maybe it got splashed somehow. I didn't think too hard about it. Second time, same thing. Third time, I asked. We were in bed. I just said, casual as possible, hey, did you use my toothbrush? She didn't even blink. Just said, yeah, I couldn't find mine. No apology. No hesitation. Just, yeah. I laughed a little, thinking she was going to joke about it, maybe say it was a one-time thing. But she looked at me like I was the weird one for even asking. I said, that's kind of gross though, right? She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. Then she said, you need to relax. You kiss me, but you're freaked out about a toothbrush. That's such a bourgeois boundary. I didn't even know what that meant. Bourgeois. Like I'm some kind of uptight dental snob because I don't want someone else's mouth gunk on my brush. I tried to explain it wasn't about germs, it was about basic hygiene, about having lines. She just kept saying, this is why relationships fail. People are obsessed with control over pointless things. I let it go that night because I didn't feel like fighting about oral hygiene at 2 a.m., but it stuck with me. Next time she came over, I hid my toothbrush in the medicine cabinet. Felt dumb doing it, but I didn't want to deal with it again. And guess what? She noticed. She went into the bathroom, came out, and straight up asked, did you hide your toothbrush? I said, yeah. She looked at me like I just insulted her whole personality, said, wow, that's really telling. I said, what is it telling exactly? She goes, that you don't trust me, that you think I'm some kind of invader. It turned into this whole thing about how I was too guarded and probably had rigid emotional wiring, whatever that means. She acted like I was putting up walls just because I didn't want to share something I put in my mouth twice a day. She turned it into a statement about compatibility. I couldn't believe we were having a full-on argument over a toothbrush. Like, what are we even doing? I offered to buy her own. A new one, any color she wanted. She rolled her eyes again and said, "It's not about the object. It's about what the object represents." I said, "It represents you using my stuff without asking." She said, "It represents you thinking we're separate instead of one." That's when I knew this wasn't going to work. I can handle quirks. I can handle messiness, lateness, weird taste in movies. But I cannot handle someone trying to convince me that boundaries are a symptom of emotional weakness. We lasted maybe one more week after that. She came over again, and I found out she'd been using the loofah I use for my face. Not the body one, the face one. I didn't even bring it up. I just stared at it, then stared at her, and she gave me that look again like it was fragile for caring. I ended it over coffee at her favorite place. Told her I liked her, but we clearly had different ideas of what personal space meant. She scoffed and said, "Wow, you're seriously breaking up over a toothbrush." I didn't argue, just nodded and left. Later, she texted me, "You're going to regret choosing isolation over intimacy." I didn't reply. And now, whenever I buy a new toothbrush, I think about her, and I always buy two. One for me and one for no one else. I met Nathan through my gym of all places, which is funny because I don't even like going. I go to trick myself into thinking I'm trying, and I usually just do the treadmill at a slow jog while listening to true crime podcasts. That's where I noticed him. Same time every week, always wore this faded blue hoodie, never used headphones. Just ran, like for real ran. Focused, no breaks, no nonsense. It was kind of impressive, kind of intense. Eventually, we started chatting by the water fountain. I made a dumb joke about the paper towels always running out, and he actually laughed. The next week, he asked if I wanted to grab smoothies after. It felt spontaneous but not pushy, so I said yes. I figured if it got weird, I could fake a phone call and then bounce. It didn't get weird at first. Nathan was normal, like genuinely decent. Not overly charming, not super quirky. Just a dude who talked like he listened and didn't interrupt. I remember thinking it was refreshing to not feel like I was in a job interview disguised as a date. We hung out a few times after that. A couple casual dinners, a movie, some walks around his neighborhood that always seemed to end near a frozen yogurt place. He was thoughtful, kind of quiet, but not awkward. We didn't dive deep into anything too personal yet, which I appreciated. Sometimes I just want to enjoy a person without dissecting their entire childhood in week one. Then, on what I think was our fifth date, things shifted. We were at his place, just sitting on his couch. He had this tiny apartment of a pet groomer, constantly smelled like wet shampoo and dog treats. We were talking about dating in general, like past relationships, what worked, what didn't. He mentioned that his last relationship ended because of trust issues. I nodded, kept it surface level, said, "That happens," or something neutral like that. Then he paused and asked, "Do you think people always cheat eventually?" I said no. Straight up. Told him I don't believe that. Some people lied. Sure, but not everyone. He kind of nodded, but I could tell he didn't agree. That's when he told me. He said that with his last girlfriend, he started going through her trash. At first, I didn't even process what he meant. Like trash is in the inbox on her phone. Old texts. Nope, literal trash. He explained like he was talking about checking the weather, that when she'd go to work, he'd go through the garbage she left in the bin just to keep an eye on things. I asked what he was even looking for. He said receipts, old notes, wrappers from places he didn't recognize. Clues. Clues. Like her leftovers were some kind of betrayal puzzle waiting to be solved. He said it started small, just noticing takeout containers and wondering who she was with. Then he found a receipt once for drinks at a place she never mentioned, and that's when he started doing what he called routine checks. Routine checks. I didn't even know what to say. I asked if she knew. He said absolutely not. That was the point. He said if he'd asked, she would have just lied. That it's not snooping if you're protecting your heart. That line stuck with me. It's not snooping if you're protecting your heart. Like that made it okay. I asked him if he thought that was healthy. He shrugged and said, "It worked. I got answers." I asked what he found. He said not much. A couple things that didn't match her story, but nothing major. I said, so you didn't catch her cheating? He goes, no, but it was enough to know she had the potential to. That's when I got quiet. Because suddenly I'm sitting there thinking about all the things I've thrown out at his place. Napkins with notes on them, food containers, receipts, anything really. And I realize he's probably already started with me too. Maybe not yet, but he will. That's just who he is. He asked why I looked weird. I told him I wasn't okay with that level of suspicion. That digging through someone's trash without their knowledge isn't protection. It's paranoia. He told me I was being naive. That trust should be earned, not assumed. That vigilance is a sign of care. I asked him if he trusted anyone. He said, only people who pass the test. The trash test. That's when I got up. I didn't yell, didn't make a scene. Just said I needed to go. He didn't fight it. Just said, let me know if this changes your view on trust. Most people come around eventually. I never came around. I never went back either. He texted me 2 days later saying he had a really good feeling about us and hoped I wasn't letting society's view of boundaries get in the way of something real. I blocked the number. And now I take out my own trash before I leave anyone's place. I know it sounds small, maybe even dumb. But that one confession opened up this whole other version of him that I didn't see before. A guy who smiles while mentally taking notes on every wrapper in your bin. Who calls it care? Who thinks love is about catching people before they slip? I don't need that kind of love. All right, so this one starts off kind of chill and then takes a weird left turn that I honestly didn't see coming. I was going through one of those phases where I was saying yes to more stuff. New hobbies, new foods, new people. Just kind of opening the door and seeing what wandered in. That's how I ended up going on a date with Kelsey. We met on an app. I don't even remember which one. Probably the one with all the profile prompts like My Ideal Sunday and the last book I read. Hers said something like, I will argue with you about whether breakfast is better at night, which felt like a safe enough kind of chaotic. Her pictures looked normal, no soft focus sunsets or group shots with 6 people I had to guess between. Just her standing in front of a bookshelf, holding what I thought was a dog that turned out to be a ferret. Anyway, we matched, chatted for a couple days. She was funny, kind of blunt, but not in a mean way. The kind of person who texts with 0 emojis but still makes you laugh. We decided to meet for dinner at this casual place I liked. Did lighting, solid fries, decent music, no pressure kind of spot. First date was honestly great. She was sharp, asked good questions. We both ordered burgers, ended up talking about weird high school teachers and horror movies that shouldn't have been scary but totally were. She made a joke about people who fake allergies just to feel powerful, and I was like, okay, she gets it. We kept seeing each other, always at restaurants. Never cooking at home, never takeout, always dining out. At first, I thought she'd just like the vibe of eating out, but I started noticing a pattern. Every time, without fail, something would go wrong. Like the server would mess up the order by one small thing. Wrong side, missing sauce, extra pickles. And Kelsey would switch up. I mean, quick. She didn't scream or throw anything, but her whole tone would change. She'd get this icy voice, like she was a disappointed teacher, and would start asking questions real slow, like, can you explain how this mistake happened? One time we were at a sushi place and her roll came out with avocado, which she'd asked for none. She flagged the server down and gave a full TED talk about attention to detail in food service, while I sat there trying to disappear into the soy sauce. I brought it up later, gently just said something like, you get kinda intense when the food's wrong. She smiled and said, oh, that's intentional. I like to see how people handle stress. I thought she meant the staff. She didn't. On our 5th date, I stuck around longer than I should have. We were at this newer place she picked. Trendy, kind of loud. Those weird menus where nothing has prices and everything has microgreens. She ordered a chicken dish and asked them to cook it without any pepper because it interfered with her palate. Not an allergy, not a preference, just interfered. Food comes out. There's definitely pepper on it. Before the server even finishes setting the plate down, Kelsey goes, there's pepper on this, and it begins. She starts talking loud enough for the nearby table to hear. Asking things like, do you even tell your chefs about dietary needs? I try to jump in. Tell her it's not a big deal. She can just ask for another one. But she turns to me and says, "No, this is important. How someone handles embarrassment in public says a lot about them." I go, "Embarrassment for who?" She goes, "Views." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a personality quirk. This was the whole thing. She was manufacturing stress on purpose, picking fights with restaurants so she could watch how I'd react, like some kind of social experiment with steak knives and cloth napkins. After the server leaves, visibly stressed and promising a new plate, Kelsey leans in all casual and goes, "That was a soft one. You handled okay. But you got quiet too fast. You need to hold your ground more." I'm like, "What do you mean soft one?" She explains very calmly that she does this in every new relationship. Restaurant arguments, small public scenes, controlled friction, she called it. Says it shows her how someone deals with pressure, unpredictability, and social tension. Says it's better to know early than find out after marriage that a guy crumbles at brunch. I just sat there. No food in front of me, no words in my head, just sitting. She goes, "Don't look so shocked. Relationships are hard. People fake being easygoing at first. I want to see what's under that." I told her that testing someone with fake chaos isn't the same as seeing how they handle real-life issues. That manufacturing stress isn't a personality test. It's manipulation. She rolled her eyes and said, "It's not manipulation. It's calibration." She said she once faked a full-on phone fight with her mom on a third date to see if the guy would step in and comfort her. I asked if he passed. She said no, because he gave her too much space and she felt emotionally abandoned. I didn't even finish my drink. I asked for the check and paid for both of us just to get it over with. She didn't seem mad, just nodded and said, "Makes sense. You're probably more of a conflict avoider than I thought." That was the last time I saw her. She texted me a week later and said, "No hard feelings. You're not built for pressure, and that's okay." Like it was a final score on some test I didn't know I was taking. I never really had a type. People always asked me that like it was a thing I was supposed to know, like hair color or favorite pizza topping. But I don't know, my dating history has always just been a mess of strange timing, weird chemistry, and me saying sure to people who made me laugh or had cool playlists. That's how Kano happened. He had a good laugh and a playlist that started with Sade and ended with some glitchy house remix of a lullaby. I figured, yeah, this could be interesting. We met at this little live poetry thing my friend dragged me to. I wasn't even planning on staying past intermission, but Kano sat next to me and made a joke about how everyone on stage seemed legally required to mention their ex in the first 3 lines. He had this kind of easy confidence, not loud, but solid. He seemed like someone who paid attention, which is rare. So when he asked me out after the second round of poems, I said yes. Didn't even hesitate. Our first few dates were good, surprisingly good. He was thoughtful, a little quirky in a controlled way, but not overbearing. He liked to talk about feelings, which, I'll be honest, was refreshing after the streak of emotionally constipated dudes I'd been dealing with before him. He actually asked how my week was and waited for a real answer. He listened. That part mattered. We'd been seeing each other for a few weeks. Nothing serious yet, but leaning that way. I'd met one of his friends. He'd met one of mine. We both left stuff at each other's places. That middle zone where everything's still light, but you can tell it might become a thing. And then he hit me with it. We were sitting on his balcony one night, sharing a blanket and drinking that weird wine. He liked that tasted like carbonated sadness. And out of nowhere, he says, "I want to invite you to something, but I need you to be open-minded about it." I braced for some kind of experimental theater show or maybe a community drum circle. But he looks at me real calm and says, "I want you to come to therapy." I blinked. He kept talking. Said it wasn't for us necessarily, not like we had issues already, but that he still goes to couples therapy with his ex, and he wanted me to join them. I laughed, thought he was doing a bit, but his face didn't change. He said he and his ex, Maya, still go every 2 weeks, not because they're trying to get back together, but because they're emotionally enmeshed and need support untangling without breaking the connection. He said they'd agree to keep growing together, just not romantically, but with guidance. And now, apparently, I was being invited into this beautiful tangle. I asked him why I would need to be there. He said, "So we can see how we all vibe, as a triangle." Triangle. I asked if he meant polyamory. He said no, that it wasn't romantic between them anymore, but that Maya would always be part of his emotional world, and it made sense for any future partner to be included in that space. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or order a ride home immediately. I told him I wasn't comfortable going to therapy with someone else's ex. He said that's exactly why I should come. Discomfort reveals truth. His words. I asked him if Maya knew he was inviting me. He said, not yet, but she'll be fine with it. She'd really evolved. So now, not only was I being asked to attend therapy with a couple I wasn't part of, I was also expected to show up unannounced like some emotional intern. He didn't see the issue. Genuinely, he said he was trying to build a relationship model based on relational inclusion. That love isn't a series of separations. It's a web. And if I couldn't accept that, maybe I wasn't ready for the kind of emotional maturity he was looking for. I told him that emotional maturity doesn't mean dragging your past into every room and asking new people to sit in it with you. He smiled like I just didn't get it. Like I was stuck in Western individualism, whatever that means. I left shortly after. Told him I needed time to think. He hugged me like we were parting for war. The next day, he sent me a calendar invite. No message. Just a Google Calendar notification titled Joint Session. Triangular alignment. I declined it. A few days later, he texted, Maya, and I felt some sadness around your response. We both held space for that today, like they'd already had a session without me, processing my decision as a group. I told him I hoped he found someone who was comfortable in that space, that it wasn't me. I blocked his number after he sent me a link to a podcast called Beyond the Binary of Breakups. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I'd gone. If I walked into that therapist's office and sat down between a guy I was just starting to know and his ex who still shared emotional custody of his heart, would they have offered me tea? Would they have asked me how I feel about sharing metaphorical space? Would they have rated my answers? I'll never know, but I'm okay with that. I'd wanting to be part of someone's healing ceremony, especially if it comes with homework and a side of X.
I had no clue what I was walking into. Like, I thought I was just going on a regular date, grab food, talk about music, maybe walk around, and pretend to care about the stars or whatever. Nothing serious. Just a decent night out with Brooke, this girl I'd been talking to for a couple weeks who liked houseplants, documentaries about weird crimes, and almond croissants. We met at a mutual friend's board game night, where she crushed me at some card game and then offered me a slice of banana bread she'd brought just in case the snack sucked. I liked her immediately. Brooke was cool. Not in that fake chill kind of way. She just had her own thing going. Moved through conversations like she'd read every page of your brain already but was polite enough not to spoil the ending. She was into therapy, which, okay, fine, most people are now. She talked about energy boundaries and holding space and stuff like that, but she wasn't preachy. Just seemed really in tune with herself. I liked that she wasn't flaky. She always followed up, always had ideas, always answered with full sentences instead of dry, lol texts. So when she asked if I wanted to come to this group dinner thing, I said yeah without really asking what it was. I figured it was her friends. I figured we'd have tacos and drinks, and I'd make a joke that didn't land, and she'd pretend it was funny anyway. I didn't expect what I got. She picked me up, already a little weird, but I rolled with it. On the drive, she was playing this playlist of soft acoustic songs with lyrics that sounded like someone whispering breakup poetry. We made small talk, nothing deep. She seemed slightly more serious than usual, but not in a bad way. Just focused. We pulled up to this house in the suburbs. Real cozy looking, porch light on, multiple cars parked outside. I said something like, "Dang, big dinner." She said, "Not really. Just the people that matter." Again, I didn't think too hard about it. I followed her inside, took off my shoes, and was immediately greeted by 4 dudes, sitting on the couch like they were waiting for a staff meeting to begin. Brooke turned to me with this big smile and said, "I want you to meet my emotional advisory board." At first I thought she was joking, like a cute little nickname for her friend group. But the way she said it, completely serious, like she was introducing a wedding party. One of the guys stood up, shook my hand, and said, "I'm Trevor. I've known Brooke since 2018. Mainly handle career stuff and boundaries." The next guy, Malik, waved from the couch and said, "I'm the attachment style one." The third guy, Jordan, just nodded and said, "Long-term logistics and trust dynamics." The fourth one didn't say much, just looked at me and said, "Emotional accountability. You'll get used to me." I thought I was on a prank show. I laughed and waited for Brooke to break the bit. But she was already heading into the kitchen to grab drinks like this was all perfectly standard. I followed her in, still confused, and asked, "So, what's going on?" She smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. I just like the people I date to meet the people who know me best." I said, "You're friends?" She said, "They're more than friends. They're part of how I stay aligned." We sat down at the dinner table, Rook at the head, me on one side, the four dudes evenly spaced around. Plates were already set. It felt like a job interview disguised as a potluck. The conversation started normal enough. Someone asked me about work, someone else complimented my jacket. But then it shifted. One of them asked, "So what does emotional presence mean to you on a day-to-day level?" I paused, looked at Brooke. She just nodded, like, "Go ahead." I answered as best I could, kind of stumbling through something about showing up for people and being honest when things are hard. One of them took notes. Not a joke. He pulled out his phone and typed something in while nodding slowly. The questions kept coming. Stuff like, "How do you handle conflict when your ego's activated?" And "What's your repair cycle after a rupture?" And "Have you ever love-bombed someone unintentionally?" I kept glancing at Brooke, hoping she'd step in, make it stop, redirect it to something less invasive. But she just listened like this was a totally normal Tuesday night, smiling, sipping her drink, occasionally saying, "Great question." At one point, I asked, "Is this how it always goes?" She said, "Only when I'm serious about someone." So now I'm not only in a room with four guys who used to date her, or almost did, or never did, but definitely could have. I'm also under review by the literal emotional Avengers. No offense, but I didn't sign up for group therapy with her exes and her accountability circle. One of the guys asked if I'd be open to a check-in in a couple weeks. I asked, like, another dinner. And he said, "No, more a relational audit. Just to see how your integration process is going." I looked at Brooke and said, "I don't think I'm built for this kind of process." She didn't look surprised, just a little disappointed, like I was another guy who didn't understand the vision. We left early. On the drive back, it was quiet. She finally said, "Most people don't have the capacity for radical transparency." I said, "Or maybe they just don't want their relationships reviewed like a group project." She nodded, like she respected the answer but still disagreed. I never saw her again after that. She didn't text. I didn't either. There wasn't anything to fight about. It just didn't fit. But sometimes I think about that night. The silence between questions. The way she looked at me like I was supposed to rise to the occasion. And how, honestly, I just wanted to eat dinner without someone asking me if I knew what my own shadow work was. I should have known Pete was a little off the second time we hung out, and he brought a notebook to lunch. Not a journal, not like one of those pocket planners people use for appointments, but an actual notebook. Hardcover, black, no logo. He took it out after we ordered and just casually jotted something down like he was making the grocery list. I asked him what he was writing, and he said, "Oh, nothing really. Just notes." That was it. Just notes. I didn't push, because everything else up to that point had been fine. We met through a mutual friend at one of those mid-tier house parties where everyone knows someone, but no one knows everyone. He made a great first impression. Easygoing, funny in a dry way, and super into random trivia. The kind of guy who could make a decent story out of how he read a shampoo bottle once. I liked him. Our first date was simple: coffee and a walk through the park. We talked about horror movies and weird childhood fears. He was attentive, but not overbearing. Seemed interested in what I had to say. No red flags. I remember thinking, cool, a normal guy who doesn't feel like he's trying to sell me essential oils or get me into crypto. But yeah, then came the notebook moment. He didn't offer an explanation, and I didn't dig. At that point, I figured maybe he was just one of those people who likes to record random thoughts or good quotes. Harmless. It wasn't until our fourth date that I found out the truth. We'd gone to this small jazz night at a bookstore cafe. It was the kind of place with uneven wooden floors and drinks with names like Poetic Steinman Fog. Afterward, we went back to his apartment for a nightcap. He had a small studio, clean but full of books. One of those people who organizes his shelves by genre, then alphabetically. He offered me tea, and while he was in the kitchen, I was just looking around, making conversation with the cat. That's when I saw it. His laptop was open on the side table. Nothing crazy, just a Google Doc on the screen. But the title caught my eye. Rankings, Date Archive, CONFLIDENTIAL. My stomach dropped before I even read a single word. But of course I read it. There were names. First names, dates, and then entries. Each one had a full paragraph. Some short, some long. Each describing a date in detail. What they wore, what they ate, what they talked about. How Pete felt about them. What the physical chemistry was like. And at the bottom of each entry, a number, like a score, out of 10, sometimes broken into categories like emotional honesty or humor vs charm. I scrolled. There I was. My name, the cafe, what I wore, what we talked about, the comment, smart, possibly guarded. Laughed at all my jokes. Good eye contact. Slightly controlling about menu choices. Watch for that. Final score, 8.2. I froze. Didn't even hear him come back into the room until he asked, "You okay?" I turned around and said, "What is this?" pointing at the screen. He didn't freak out, didn't get defensive. Just set the mugs down and said, "I knew this would probably happen eventually." Which made it worse. He explained, real calm, like a podcast host, that he keeps a private blog, anonymous, password protected, where he logs every date he goes on. Said it helps him track patterns, reflect on his growth, and stay accountable. Said most people aren't honest about how they feel during dating, but writing it all down helped him be transparent with himself. He said, "I don't post names or pictures. It's just for me and a few people I trust." I said, "What do you mean, a few people you trust?" He admitted, again, very casually, that he has a small group of subscribers. A list of readers who get the entries by email. He said they give him feedback, insight, emotional perspectives he might miss. Kind of like an advisory panel, he said, like that made it fine. I asked, "So people are reading about my dates with you? About what I wore and what I said and how you ranked me?" He said yes, but that it was never meant to be judgmental. It's about clarity. I told him it was creepy, invasive, that it felt like he was observing me, not being with me. He told me I was overreacting, that everything he wrote was respectful, that I should actually be flattered to have made the archive. I left. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just walked out. Later that night, he texted me something like, "I'd still like to get to know you better if you can see past your discomfort." I didn't answer. He followed up a few days later with an update. My score had been revised. Apparently, I dropped to 7.4 due to my reactionary emotional stance. I blocked his number. To this day, I wonder how many women are on that list. How many of them got scored for the way they folded their napkin or paused before answering a question? I wonder how many of them know. Dating already feels like being judged half the time. Pete just made it official, quantified, filed it into a system, and turned emotions into bullet points. The thing about dating apps is that they turn your brain into a slot machine. You swiped, you match, you get a hit of dopamine. It's dumb, but it works. After a while, I stopped even thinking about the people behind the profiles and just started responding to whatever felt easy. That's where I was at when I matched with Brita. She stood out because her bio said, "Here for the weirdos only," and I thought, all right, that's either a red flag or a fun time. Her photos were all slightly blurry, but in a way that felt intentional. Like she didn't want to be perceived too clearly. One was of her holding a Polaroid camera in front of her face. Another was her standing next to a goat. Not like on a farm, just on a sidewalk. No context. I figured either she had chaotic energy or was trying way too hard. I swiped anyway. We matched. Her first message was, "Tell me the most shameful food you still eat regularly." I said SpaghettiOs straight from the can, cold. She said she respected it. We talked for about 3 days before meeting up. Brita was intense in person. Not in a scary way, more like she was constantly studying people. Every time I said something, she'd tilt her head slightly, like she was measuring it against something invisible. We met at a bookstore cafe and ended up sitting outside for almost 3 hours just talking. Mostly about dumb stuff. Music, middle school trauma, a weird dream she'd had where her teeth turned into baby carrots. I remember leaving that night thinking she might be one of the most interesting people I'd ever talked to. Things moved fast. Not physically, but emotionally. Within a week, we were texting constantly, making little plans, sending each other memes at 2 a.m. She started calling me her person in this joking way that felt just serious enough to be confusing. I didn't mind. I was into it. It felt like something real was building. Then came the weird part. We were hanging out at her place, this small upstairs apartment with an aggressively pink bathroom and 4 lava lamps in the living room. She went into the kitchen to get drinks, and her phone buzzed. Not usually a big deal, except the name that popped up on the screen was literally mine. Same name, same spelling, same emoji she'd put next to my contact. I thought maybe she had me saved twice, or maybe her ex had the same name, or something. I didn't touch the phone or snoop, but I made a mental note. When she came back, I casually asked, "Hey, do you know more than one person with my name?" She paused, smiled real slow, then said, "Oh, you saw that." I laughed a little, like, what does that mean? She put the drinks down and sat next to me like she was about to pitch me a startup. She said she needed to confess something. Apparently, before we met, she made a fake dating profile. She said it started as a joke, that she wanted to see what kind of guys were into her type. Girls who were quirky, maybe a little mysterious, offbeat but hot, as she put it. So she made an alter ego. A totally different profile under a different name, but with similar pictures. Nothing too obvious, just the same style. She matched with me, on the fake profile, before she matched with me for real. Then she watched how I messaged the fake girl, and based on how I responded, she decided I was worth meeting on her real profile. I was sitting there with my mouth open, trying to figure out what she just said. She kept talking, like it wasn't a big deal. Said it was a test of sincerity. She wanted to see if I was into girls for who they were or just how they looked. She said I passed because I didn't say anything gross and I didn't immediately try to meet up. Then she said, and this is where it really got nuts. But when we matched for real, I noticed you answered a couple questions differently. And that's when I started to wonder if you were actually trustworthy. I asked, what questions? She said stuff like favorite movie, ideal date, biggest fear. That I'd answered one thing with her alter ego and slightly different things with her. I said, because I didn't think I was talking to the same person. She said, but don't you think your answers should be consistent if they're honest? That's when I got quiet, because now I realized I wasn't just on a date, I was being audited. I asked her if she still had the fake profile up. She said yes, said it was helpful. That sometimes she uses it to see if people she's dating would swipe on it. I said, have you done that with me? She said yes. She said she recreated the fake profile a week ago just to test if I'd swipe on it again now that we were sort of together. I said, and? She said, you did. I tried to explain that I was mindlessly swiping one night after work and didn't even recognize it was her because it looked completely different. But she was already checked out. She said, if you were truly into me, you wouldn't need to keep swiping at all. I said we weren't exclusive, that we never even talked about that. She said, I don't need to say it out loud. Connection should be enough. I left not long after that. No yelling. Just silence. That weird kind of silence where someone clearly feels justified, but also quietly smug about catching you doing something you didn't know was even a rule. She texted me 2 days later. I'm going to unmatch from the fake you now. Real you's disappointing enough. I didn't reply. So yeah, that's the story of how I got honey-trapped by a girl who used a decoy profile to test if I was emotionally pure enough for her main personality. Moral of the story, there isn't one. Dating apps are cursed. People are weird. And apparently, even when you're being yourself, someone might still be grading you for it.